in the back? Can you hear me? Okay. Well, I'd like to just share some pictures. My wife and I went to Holsford, France for the 75th anniversary of Ollie Murphy's one-man stand. So I'll just start with some photographs in chronological order. And I got a couple of bonus trivia photographs on the trip that I'll throw in. But in the 1980s, we were living in Louisiana, and we took a trip out to the Texas Hill Country, Austin and San Antonio and Fredericksburg, where the Nimitz Museum is. And we're touring the state capitol in Austin, and you walk into the Capitol, they have all these life-size statues and paintings of Sam Houston, Travis, and all the Texas heroes. And in there, this caught my eye. But let me go back, and when I was 10 and 13 years old, when I was 10 years old, I saw John Wayne's Sands of Iwo Jima. And that really, something about the name, Mount Suribachi and Iwo Jima just really fascinated me. And then when I was 13 years old, 1955, Audie Murphy played himself in the movie To Hell and Back, and that movie resonated with me too. So those two movies were the foundation of my interest in military history. I'm not a veteran, I was never in the military, but I've always been interested in history. And so when I saw this in the state capitol, Audie Murphy, and that's Davy Crockett on the right. Even though he was from Tennessee, he died at the Alamo. I would say the two most revered figures in Texas are Audie Murphy and Davy Crockett. And so when I saw those pictures, I said, oh, yeah, those two movies I saw, The Hell and Back and Iwo Jima, it brought me back to Audie Murphy. And so I didn't pay much attention after that. So in 1994, my son was in the Army in Germany. He was a second lieutenant, and he's a tank commander in Germany. And he said, hey, Dad, let me show you what I've been doing. He showed me his scrapbook, and he would go all over Germany and Belgium and parts of France, and he would carry a then photograph. Oh, wrong thing. What's that mean, Susan? Anyway, he would carry a then photograph. That's Adolf Hitler in the stadium in Nuremberg, where every September he would hold the Nuremberg rallies before 200,000 Hitler Youth and SS. So he showed me his scrapbook, and so I got fascinated with the scrapbook because he would show then and now photographs. And the first place he took us was to Nuremberg and to the podium at the stadium there. And that's my son on the left, and I'm holding my granddaughter. And from that day, that was 26 years ago, I just got hooked on going to places in Europe and finding then and now places and photographing them. And I got hooked immediately, and that was 26 years ago. And my passion hasn't waned. In fact, it's increased even at my age now. And so after Audie Murphy was killed in the plane crash, the interest in Audie Murphy kind of waned, and he kind of faded out of sight. That was 71 David, when he got killed. 1971 when he got killed. People tended to forget about him until 1996 when this A&E biography showed on TV, and that started a renewed interest in Audie Murphy. This is a great DVD. If you don't have it, go buy it. It's about his life, and so it generated new interest in Audie Murphy. And I just joined Audie Murphy fan club. There's two of them. Betty Tate is with the Audie Murphy fan club, and I was really pleased that there's about 20,000 people that are son hadn't showed me his scrapbook, I would have, from here, we made more trips to Europe. And then in 2008, I went to the Philippines with 5 survivors of the Bataan Death March. And for 2 weeks, we would ride with them, and we rode the Bataan Death March, and they would tell us all the atrocities that they not only endured, but witnessed. And at that point, I quit being a tourist, and I thought, I want to do something for these World War II vets. I don't know how or what, but I wanted to do something for their memory. And 2 years later, I went to Iwo Jima with 35 veterans that fought on Iwo Jima. So when I got back home, I've got all my photographs and put them in chronological order, and I put them into this book, In the Footsteps of Valor. It's places I've been to in Europe and the Pacific, and they're in the bookstore. It's a $30 book, which is a good price. I wanted to keep the price low for a hardcover cover book. And I've got about 30 pages of Audie Murphy in here. I kind of did the book, built it around Audie Murphy. It's 230 pages, about 30 of it's of Audie Murphy. And so from there, now that I had a book, I started getting speaking engagements, and then I started putting it on Facebook. And Audie Murphy was in the 3rd Infantry. My son was in the 3rd Infantry, and I didn't know anything. I didn't even know what the 3rd Infantry was in 1994. But anyway, I started posting some of my pictures on Facebook, and the president of the 3rd Infantry Society saw it, and he asked me to be the historian for the magazine, 3rd Infantry magazine. I said, what do I have to do? He said, just do what you're doing on Facebook. Then about 2 years ago, he asked me to be the editor of our magazine, and I said, I don't have a clue how to be an editor for the magazine. He said, just keep doing what you're doing on Facebook. So now, I didn't want the job. It's a volunteer. I don't get a nickel for doing it, and it consumes my time. And I didn't want it, but now that I've accepted it, I got to go to the Pentagon for a Medal of Honor ceremony. I got to meet Robert Edsel in Dallas. He's the author of the Monuments Men. That's a fascinating story about the Nazis looted 5 million paintings and artifacts from mostly the Jews during the occupation of France. And I got to go to Holsville, so I'm glad I did it now. Anyway, this is 16-year-old Audie Murphy. Does that look like a future soldier? And he was at the gas station, and he looks like a 12-year-old. And so all he wanted to be after his mother died, and all he wanted to be was a soldier. And so who would think that, they were in dire poverty. You might have seen the picture of the railroad car that the family had to live in twice, and they relied on charity, churches, and what game Audie could hunt for them to eat. And he just wanted to be a soldier, and all through boot camp, they ridiculed him for his size, and he had a sergeant that kept continuing to call him baby because he was freckle faced and baby faced, and he hated that. And so they try to make a cook out of him to keep him out of combat. Who could imagine that guy would come back 3 years later? And he had disdain for medals. He threw some away. He gave some away. They meant nothing to him. Getting back to the trip, we flew into Geneva, Switzerland, and I was fascinated with Lake Geneva, all the people, famous people that are buried in Switzerland. There's Coco Chanel, Richard Burton, David Niven, Peter Ustinov, Audrey Hepburn. And I tried to find their graves, but I couldn't find them. But the main one I wanted to see was Charlie Chaplin and his wife Una Chaplin. So we went to their they got a big museum on, his estate. He's got about 30 acres on Lake Geneva and a big house. And so that was one of the highlights of, I never cared much for Charlie Chaplin until, I never watched any of his silent movies. But anyway, it was really interesting to, go visit where he was banned from Hollywood and he moved to Switzerland. And then that's his house, his estate in, Switzerland. And one other thing, on the way in Mulhouse, France, which is just about 20 miles from where Audie was in Komark, the Bugatti Museum. The Bugattis are one of the rarest and most expensive automobiles in the world. They sell for about $2 million. And these two brothers, they tried to buy every Bugatti there was in the world. They got about 120 of them here. They got Charlie Chaplin's Rolls Royce and they got all kind of other cars. So anyway, that was a highlight. So then we head into Komark, France, and that's where the Komark Pocket is. The Komark Pocket was from Komark to Strasbourg, France in the north. And Komark, this region, this Alsace-Lorraine region, it switched hands between the Germans and the French from war to war to war. Both countries claimed it. So when a world war would come out, the France took it back, and then the Germans took it back when they occupied France in 1940. And it's a strong German influence, the buildings. And when my son went there in, might have been 98 or so, they still accepted German marks in France here. Anyway, it's called the Venice of France with the canals and all the architecture. And that's the Komark Pocket. It's kind of called the Forgotten War because at that time Normandy had just happened and we'd broken through at Normandy. But so this was kind of a forgotten battle, and Audie and the 3rd Infantry, after their battle in Italy, they landed near Saint-Tropez in southern France. And Audie Murphy only had, at that time in Italy, all during that Italian campaign, Sicily, North Africa, he only had one bronze star. And of course that didn't matter to him. He wanted it for medals. But when he went into southern France, that's when he started racking up the medals. And this is a French cemetery. This is the largest French cemetery in France. It's in Komark. You can see the graves on the left, and this is 1914, 1918, World War I, and then there's another column on the right, which is 1940 to 1945, which is World War II, and these are all French soldiers that were killed in the two wars. And that's a Statue of Liberty. It was designed by a guy named, I can't pronounce the French name, Auguste Bartoli. He's from Komark, and he designed the Statue of Liberty that was sent to America. And this is the Statue of Liberty in Komark on a roundabout in a traffic lane. It's very, very nice model. But anyway, that's we got our Statue of Liberty as a gift from France, and the designer lived right there in Komark. And this is a beautiful area. This is from Strasbourg to Komark. And they call it the wine and cheese route. These are all vineyards, wine and cheese vineyards here at the base of the mountains. These are the Vosges Mountains. And so we had an extra day, so we drove over the Vosges Mountains on the other side, because the 3rd Infantry at first, after they landed in southern France, they came up from on the western side of the Vosges Mountains. They went up to Strasbourg and then down here to Komark Pocket, Hosford. And so this is a beautiful place. But in January 26, 1945, that was my 3rd birthday. It was 2 degrees below zero and about 2 feet of snow. It was that same storm that was going on with the Battle of the Bulge at the time. It was the worst storm in 40 years, and it was cold, freezing. And so as we make our way to Holzwehr, this says Audie Murphy Boulevard. I don't have my glasses, but take my word, it does say it there. Anyway, that's he's German, but he was born in Komark, and his grandfather fought for the Germans in World War I. His father fought for the Germans in World War II. And he's just as pro Audie Murphy as Betty Tate and David. I mean, he just went crazy over Audie Murphy, and here he is, a German. But one of the, this is in the summer of 44, around June or July 1944. One of the villagers took a picture of that tank on the top. That's one of the 6 tanks that Audie Murphy had fought off. And that building on the left, Holsfair was about 90% destroyed during the battle. And this is one of the few original buildings left in Holsfair today. And you might have read when the 3rd Infantry crossed the, I can't pronounce it, Lille River. It's still there. I took this picture of that. That's prominent all through Audie Murphy's biography as they went into the Komark Pocket. And now this was January 26th when we went there. It's winter time. But this shows you the battlefield. That's the village of Komark at the bottom, Holsfair at the bottom. And they're just a mile away from, see where number 1 is circled? That's where Audie Murphy and his 17 men were at the edge of the woods. Number 2 is where the artillery, they would direct artillery from number 2. And about, Audie Murphy was in a battalion or group with about 120 Americans, and they got in a big battle, and there were only 17 left, and the commanding officer was killed. So that's when Audie Murphy assumed command of the 17 men. So there's just 17 or 18 men in the woods. I don't know what happened to my pointer. This is where Audie Murphy and his men are. And 17 men. So about 3 o'clock that morning, they had two M10 tank destroyers brought to them. So they didn't get those 2 tank destroyers till about 3 in the morning. And they were expecting the Germans to attack at dawn, at daybreak. But they didn't attack till about 1 or 2 in the afternoon. So about 1 or 2 in the afternoon, anyway, Audie Murphy, he put 1 tank destroyer in the back and then another one in the front. And he was prepared for the Germans. So when the Germans pulled out of Holsfair and coming toward their position, I still don't understand. David, you may can explain it, but it would take tanks maybe 5 minutes to get from 1 mile in Holsfair to the woods. They had 6 tanks and 250 infantrymen. All they had to do was drive to these 17 guys. But yet, Audie was on that M10 for 55 minutes, almost an hour. And I can't understand to this day why the Germans just didn't drive in 5 minutes.
They couldn't see because it was on fire and the smoke, the black smoke, they couldn't see through it. So they couldn't see where it was going.
Yeah.
But he could see.
Yeah. And I got a letter from one of the German guys that was, his tank was disabled, and so he said, somebody had us zeroed in, but they didn't know where it was coming from, and that was Audie Murphy, because he was on that burning tank destroyer. They didn't know where all the 50 caliber bullets were coming from that were cutting down their infantry. But anyway, this is that's the battlefield, and the road is right here. I don't know if you can see it very well. And there's a drainage ditch about 3 or 4 feet deep right alongside the road. So anyway, about 2 o'clock, here come the 6 German tanks and 250 infantrymen. And so this is where that stone there, that's where the Audie Murphy's tank was. And he was calling artillery from that little depression right there. So he was calling artillery from about a mile back. And when my son first went there, and I went there in must have been 1998, It was in the winter also. That's the little road there. Audie Murphy was told, hold this road at all costs. So my son and I were walking, this is Holtzville, and that's were in the woods, and we were walking on these fields. This is our first visit there. We didn't know too much about it. We kept stepping in these little depressions in the field. And so we figured out that that was artillery, where artillery shells were hidden. And Betty, you know Charlotte Tompers?
No.
You know Charlotte Tompers? She sent me this photograph. She's from Luxembourg, and she was at the meeting ceremony. And she sent me this amazing photograph from Google that's showing the depressions that my son and I were walking in and stepping in from space. So that's a pretty amazing photo to me. After 75 years, they're still there. This is Holtzville, and this is the view that the 17 or 18 men had of the 6 tanks and 250 infantrymen when they left. This is what it looked like. When you only got 17 or 18 men and you see these tanks and 250 guys, you think, you know, we're going to get killed or we're going to get captured, one of the two. There's no way we can fight that. And this is the view that the Germans had as they approached. That's the edge of the forest right there, and that's where the 17 men. So as they got closer, Audie ordered the 17 men into the woods, and he jumped up on that M10 tank destroyer, and it was on fire, because he said no sense in nobody else helping me what one man could do. So he jumped on that burning tank destroyer. He knew he couldn't do any damage to the tanks, so he started concentrating on the infantry, killing as many of the infantry as he could.
Hey, Henry. What would be the significance, if you could explain the significance of having infantry with the tanks? Why did it matter so much?
Well, the tanks are supported by infantry, and they rely on them. And yeah, I thought the same thing too, but if you don't have infantry, Jim, you might know what's important. Jim's a Vietnam vet. What's important of having infantry supporting tanks?
Well, the tanks are more, excuse me, the tanks are more in support of the infantry. The infantry are the ones that go out and confront the other enemy personnel. The tanks are in support of, so all the tanks have infantry around for support. And that's how the tanks basically know where the enemy are, is from the contact with the radio on the back of the tank. And with the 250 men, I'm assuming that they thought they had them outnumbered and they could overpower them with personnel and the tanks in support. That's just what I'm guessing.
Thank you.
So after the tanks saw their infantrymen, 50 to 100 of them were killed or put out of action. And this went on for 55 minutes. And so the tank started retreating back to Holtzville. And so Audie Murphy, after being up there for 55 minutes, he jumped off the tank and went back into the woods with his men, and the tank exploded, blew that whole turret off. And I got a piece of here, if you want to take a look at it after, a tank valve from Audie Murphy's tank destroyer. I found it in the woods. I found it accidentally. I stepped on it and bit it. And so anyway, and I got some 30 caliber cartridges that were part of the battle. And so anyway, it exploded, and Audie Murphy's men, all through almost 3 years of combat, they called him Lucky. And Audie Murphy said, "I'm a fugitive from the law averages," and I believe God was with him too, overlooking him. But he was such a daredevil, and he took such chances. And I just talked with one of the guys that was with Audie Murphy, and they said, we thought he was crazy. We thought he was nuts, the stuff he did.
Yeah.
Nobody else would do it. But he wasn't just a wall man. He took calculated risks. He charge up a few he did. He did charge up some German machine gun nests, but he took calculated risks. And all that, I think, is from his growing up here in the area from hunting in the woods here. And this is this tank destroyer here, the one in the lead. There's ice on the road. It was two below zero, and that tank destroyer tried to maneuver and turn around and slid on the ice and slid in that ditch with its cannon pointing upward, so it was rendered useless then. And the man, he's passed away, but the man's name is Tardif. He was in that tank destroyer, so he and one other guy ran out of that tank destroyer into the woods. And the 6 members of his family were the special guests of this ceremony between the French government and the people there. So we got to meet the 6 members. And now Don Ekman, which y'all probably know, he was here a few years ago. And I stayed in close contact with him from years, and I even wrote an article about him. I call it Saving Private Ekman, kind of play on words with Saving Private Ryan, because he owed his life to Audie Murphy. And then Nadine signed this on the bottom right, and then the Tardif, the daughter of the Tardif, signed that for me this past January. That's Don Ekman at Audie Murphy's grave, and that's his daughter, Debbie Ekman. And I want to read you this letter. This is one of my treasures, which Don and I traded photographs, and he would send me photographs, and I sent him a picture of that one. But he wrote me this letter in his handwriting. He wrote it in January 3rd, 2012, and he said, "Dear Mr. Bodden, thank you for sending the photo. Sometimes I can't remember a lot of things, but I will never forget that day pictured in the drawing. I try to remember to thank God every day that I survived that day and have been able to enjoy a very good life. My wife and I have been married for 63 years with 4 children, grandchildren, and now several great-grandchildren. We've been able to travel to several places in the world: Central America, Indonesia, China, Australia, Europe, and Holzberg. On November 11th, the Veterans Day, I was greatly honored to receive the Knight of the Legion of Honor from the French government at a ceremony in our church. I'm very proud and humbled to have served with a unit such as the 3rd Infantry Division, and to have been able to know and serve with Audie Murphy. Thought you might be interested in the program. But anyway, this is in his own handwriting. This is one of my favorite bits of memorabilia. Anyway, Don just passed away a couple of years ago. He was the last one of the 17 that were with him, the last eyewitness to that day. Oh, that's okay. That's the letter I just read to you. And that painting, Jim Laurier, you know, the painting you just got, Jim. That tree there, that was this was about 20 years ago. That tree was still there, and Jim Laurier that did the painting, he put that tree in the painting to be totally accurate about the battle. This is the one right where the tank destroyer was. This is Michel, forgot his last name, but he's from France, but they have reenactors that get 3rd Infantry uniforms and they reenact the battle, and they are so grateful to the 3rd Infantry for liberating Holzberg. Anyway, he's standing on the stump of that tree where that tree was, and that's where the Audie Murphy was on that M10. And then the monument, the memorial in the back, that's what it looks like. I don't know if you can see it, but that's Audie Murphy there. So the town of Holtzville, they chose to honor this one man, Audie Murphy, that liberated the village. And that's the actual tank destroyer Audie Murphy was on. That one that slid into the ditch, that was removed within the year, I think. But when Audie Murphy went back to Holtzville as a guest of the French government in 1948 and 49, his tank destroyer was still on the road. And Patrick Bowman, the guy that built the memorial, he said his father told him that that was still there as late as 1958 or 59. Can you imagine that tank on that little road and still there? And so that's, I bought this magazine in May of 2002, and so I got all 6 of the Charter family to sign it for me. That's the tank destroyer that slid into the ditch that we're, I think his name is Joe Carter, he was in. That's what it looked like after it slid in the ditch. And that's him. And 4 of the family signed that for me. That's what it looks like in the snow. And that's that ditch. They had a squad of 12 Germans sneaking up, trying to outflank him in that ditch. And the smoke cleared away on the tank destroyer for just a second. And Audie Murphy saw him out of the corner of his eye. And he cut down all 12 of them. In his autobiography, he stacked them like cordwood. And went on about a business. And they got within 10 feet of him at one time. But they didn't know where the fire was coming. You know, they didn't think anybody would be dumb enough to be on a burning tank destroyer, so they didn't know where it was coming from. That's the Charter family standing in not exactly the ditch where their father was, but that's part of it. That's them. They came all the way from, I think they're from New Hampshire in Rhode Island, so they came all the way to France for the 75th anniversary. That's them again, placing a wreath at the memorial. That's them returning, and all the guys in the Army uniforms, they're Frenchmen. They're reenactors. That's the Charter family again. You can see the trees have no leaves in the wintertime, but in the summer it's really, really pretty. So the program for the 75th anniversary, this is in French too. That's what the program looked like. And that's in all these little villages in the Komark Pocket and the wine and cheese things. The battle, all the battles took it all around all these little towns, and most of the towns were just about completely destroyed. This isn't Holtzville, but it's another town right by Holtzville, and the people are coming out. They have celebrations all over the area for their liberation. And we met at the edge of Holtzville, and we followed this group of reenactors, and we walked the mile to the memorial down the road, the little road where the Audie Murphy and the tank destroyers were on. They had an American band from Germany come to play the music, and this is that's Patrick Bowman. On the left, you can barely see his face. He's the one that built the memorial. He's the one that his father and grandfather were German, and fought with the Germans. And he loves to show tourists or anybody that shows up at Holtzville, he takes them on a tour. I lead tours every year to Normandy and Paris and France and Germany. And when we stop here, he has the TV news and the press out there to greet us. One time there were only about 10 of us. We show up and there's press and the media, but he loves the Komark area, and he loves the Americans and Audie Murphy, and yet his heritage is German. I guess his father and grandfather will be turning over their grave now if they do what he put. Anyway, that's Patrick, and that's the mayor of Holzfair at the memorial, and that's on the right. There were some people dressed in the Alsatian garb, and that's Patrick again speaking. That's me right there in the red. Anyway, he's introducing. We're getting ready to. This was a joint effort with the French government and the 3rd Infantry and visitors. And when they played, that's Patrick. That's the president of the 3rd Infantry Society, Toby Knight. He lives in San Antonio, and he's the one that gave me the job as the editor for the magazine. And he joined me in at the ceremony. And that's another view looking out. That's some of the people, just general people there. And that's some more of the French reenactors at the memorial. This guy, his name, he's a Frenchman. His name is Richard Poteau. In 1940, he was with the French resistance. When the Germans occupied France, he joined the French resistance. Then in 1941, he went to England to join Charles de Gaulle for the French government in exile. And they planned and instructed the French resistance what to do from England. And so he was there. And that's Patrick again at the memorial. And just recently, in the last year, Holzfair is about 12 miles from the Rhine River in Germany. That's all. It's very close to Germany. And Viking cruise ships, they've been going up and down the Rhine for years. Well, anyway, these people at the top that I'm pictured with, they talked Viking cruises to stop, and they bus in hundreds of tourists daily. They had 12,000 people last year, and they'll bus them in from Germany and take them to Holzfair. And so that's becoming a real good tourist opportunity for France. That's one of the signs they got right there by the memorial. And the next day after the ceremony, this is the Komark newspaper. They featured Joe Tardif in the paper. And I forgot to tell you, it's such a prideful moment standing there. I love the French national anthem, and I love the British national anthem. I love our anthem, but the band played the French national anthem. Then they played the American national anthem, and it was really a great source of pride to stand there with the French people. And so, who is Ollie Murphy? Who's this little scrawny guy that just wanted to be a soldier and came back the most decorated? And he got that from his favorite part of growing up in the area was his friends when he went to Celeste, when he went to school in Celeste. And he joined a group of kids there, and they were rough kids, daredevils. They would shoot cigarettes out of each other's mouth. They were all expert shooters, and they did all kind of daredevil stuff, so that's where he got it from. But anyway, in 1946, after he got back, he was in Hollywood. James Cagney had already taken him to Hollywood. He was driving to Greenville for Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. And he saw this guy out in the rain hitchhiking, so he gave him a ride. And you see how big this guy is. And so he picks him up, and they get in the car. And so this guy says, "Man, this little sissy wearing a suit, looks like a kid. I'm gonna steal his car and rob him. So he points his finger through his jacket into Audie's rib cage, pretending it's a gun. So Audie Murphy didn't know it was his finger. He thought it was a real gun. And he said, "I'm taking your car." So Audie Murphy thought about it for about 15 seconds. And then he hit him in the car, and they got out, and they had a 10-minute fight in the parking lot. And it was raining. And he's in a suit. And you, up close, you can see the big guy there. His face is all cut up. And only Ollie Murphy could have done that. Who else would do that?
He's not even muddy.
Huh?
Ollie Murphy doesn't have any, he's not even muddy.
Yeah, just his shoes. I mean, this guy he picked the wrong guy, but this guy just killed 240 Germans. It's raining out there. Anyway, he didn't know he just killed 240 Germans, so he just took on the wrong guy. But look how big he is. He won't be this big for And just a little bit of trivia. Just a little bit of trivia. I'm doing a story right now that will come out in October. Betty, you know Valerie. Yeah. This Valerie, y'all, she's one of my Facebook friends. And that's James Arnett. Have you ever wondered who the other guy is, the gunslinger in the street? And so I got to know Valerie on Facebook, and that's his first father. And he came from, his parents came from Finland, settled in Washington. And he became an expert fast draw artist. He would shoot the heads off the rattlesnakes 20 feet in Washington. And then he would look at guys like John Wayne and Gary Cooper, and he criticized, they're too slow drawing. And so he developed a special holster which didn't hinder the drawing of the pistols. And he trained, in the 50s and 60s, he trained all the Hollywood actors, the art of the fast draw, including James Arnett, who was at Anzio with Audie Murphy. He got James Arnett got wounded at Anzio, and even during the Gunsmoke series, he kind of walked with a limp, you could tell. But anyway, so Valerie grew up with all these movie stars, and that her father would teach the art of the fast draw. So this is an article I'm doing for our October issue about who that guy is. And Audie Murphy is the godfather of Valerie. That's how close they were, the family. That's Arbo, and he made this special hunting rifle for Audie. And Audie and Arbo were going to go into business selling this rifle to hunters in California. And that's Valerie, and she signed some prints for me and sent it to me. And Susan, where's Susan?
Here.
This is a letter you gave me to take to Holzbeer
Oh,
to give to the mayor. And coming over here last week, I thought, you know what I'd like to do? And I contacted Patrick Bowman in Holzbeer. I said, Patrick, let me run this by you. I'm going to Greenville next week to do a program on the anniversary. I said, I think it would be nice if Holzbeer and Greenville could become sister cities. And he's got a real thick German accent, but he said, that would be great, Henri. So I'm gonna try and maybe find somebody in city government in Greenville. And what do you think of Greenville and Holzbeer being sister cities?
I bet they would, yeah, we can talk to Carol.
Huh?
We can, yeah, I know who you can talk to, yeah.
Okay. He's all for it. He said, just let me know. The Holzbeer would be glad to do it. Just contact the people in Greenville and see if they'd be interested in doing that. So I think that'd be great. I don't know that much what sister cities do, but I guess I think they kind of promote each other. And, so, what do y'all think about that, Coltsville? And
That'd be great.
so I'm gonna look into that,
Okay.
and I'm gonna give them their email. And that's the end of the program. Thank you very much. Any questions?
In reference to Valerie, she told me that of all the TV stars and movie stars that her dad taught to fast draw, Audie was the only one to outdraw the teacher.
That what?
She was the only one to outdraw the teacher.
You know who she told me the fastest draw of all the Hollywood actors? Anybody have a guess? You'd never guess it.
Sammy Davis.
Sammy Davis Jr. She told me Sammy Davis Jr. was the fastest quick draw artist. You don't think of him as a cowboy, but you know he was a dancer, and you got to be agile and good reflexes, and so I can see where he did. So
I bet he would not shoot Audie.
yeah, and it's kind of ironic, you know. He taught Audie and James Arness, and they were both in the 3rd Infantry, and Anzio became movie stars, TV stars. And any more questions or?
Have you kind of figure those 17 people kind of thought that they knew what the guys at the Alamo felt like
Yeah.
when all them Germans were coming in before he jumped on that tank?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
The Mr. Bowman, that his father and grandfather were both German and fought with those wars, was his mother French, or how did he end up in France?
I don't know anything about his mother. He's never mentioned anything about it.
Why he, landed there? How it was.
That's a good question. I don't know anything about his mother. He never mentioned anything about her. I don't know if she's still alive or what, but he was born and raised in Komark, which is France. So, you know.
Alright, thank you.
I got about 10 of our magazines here. If you want a copy, it's in the autobiography to Hell and Back. Audie Murphy talks about in Italy, they seek shelter in a cave hiding from the Germans. Well, our Italian outpost in Italy found this cave, and so there's some pictures and the story of Audie and his men in this cave. If anybody wants a copy.
Cool, thank you very much. And we have, let's see, next month our speaker is going to be John Smith, who was supposed to speak a few months ago, but their child got sick, so he's coming next month. He's going to speak about the American Revolution. And we also have movie night and Muncie at the Museum is going to be on September 26th. And thank you all for coming. I'm glad everybody came.
This video has been brought to you by GEUS 34. GEUS is your community-owned provider for electric, internet, cable TV, and true local programming.